Christmas Eve, and Vienna's Rathausplatz was ablaze with light. But amidst the festive tide, a woman stood shivering by a stone bench, her silent tears freezing. She was deaf, and her silent sobs went unnoticed, lost beneath the holiday crowd's clamor. People brushed past, too busy, oblivious to her trembling lips. A group of drunk young men noticed her hesitation. They laughed, leaning in to mock her inability to hear their cruel words. She flinched, retreating. Adrian, a 34-year-old single dad, stepped forward, shielding her. His 8-year-old daughter, Mila, tugged his hand and signed, "Daddy, she's scared." Adrian looked at the woman and signed back, "You are safe now." Elara, 27 years old, felt the glare of the Christmas lights, a million tiny bulbs. But her heart was colder than the gathering snow. She was physically surrounded by warmth, by the scent of pine and mulled wine, yet utterly alone. For her, the square was a brightly lit, silent tomb. This wasn't just Christmas. It was the anniversary of her despair, marked only by the final, stinging text message from her ex-boyfriend earlier that day. "I don't want to live with someone who can't hear. I deserve better." For an entire week, Elara hadn't spoken to a soul. She hadn't eaten a full meal. She watched the families, the laughing, the hugging, the easy, audible love, and felt like an alien artifact, misplaced and unwanted. Every time she tried to signal her distress, every time she moved her lips in a plea, the silence of the world mocked her efforts. When the trio of drunken young men approached, she tried to speak, to mouth the single word, "Stop." "Nah," but her exhausted lips failed her, producing a garbled sound they immediately seized upon. "It can't hear us," one slurred, his voice booming and distorted through her internal silence. "Maybe it can't see us either," another jeered, attempting to grab her scarf. Elara recoiled, her body shaking violently, tears blurring the edges of the colorful stands. Her eyes were wide, red, filled with sheer, unadulterated terror. The men closed in, their shadows long and menacing in the artificial glow. Suddenly a presence. A hand settled on her shoulder, gentle, warm, and entirely non-threatening. It was not a gesture of demand, but of protection. Adrian, towering slightly over the aggressors, looked at them with an unnervingly calm expression. His voice, when he spoke, was low but firm, a command that cut through the noise. "Move along, now!" The boldness of the stranger shocked the bullies, who eventually muttered threats and stumbled away. It was then that the small girl, Mila, stepped forward. Mila's hair was the color of chestnuts, and her eyes were serious. She looked directly at Elara, offering a small, comforting smile. Mila lifted her small hand and signed, slow and clear, "It's okay. My name is Mila." Elara froze. It was the first time, the very first time, that anyone had spoken her language, the language of her soul, in that place, in that moment of crisis. The shock was dizzying, overwhelming. Adrian knelt slightly, bringing his gaze level with hers. He signed, his movements deliberate and kind. "Would you like to come somewhere safer?" Elara could only nod, a single silent tear tracing a path down her cheek. Adrian led her away, not rushing, always ensuring she could follow his lead. He settled her onto a quieter bench near a warm cocoa stall, purchasing a steaming cup for her. The heat of the mug radiated through her numb fingers. She signed slowly, her hands rusty with disuse and embarrassment. "I don't want to be a bother." Adrian signed back immediately, his smile genuine. "You are not a bother. You are cold." For Elara, it was a revelation. It had been years, a lifetime perhaps, since she felt truly seen, not as a collection of needs or a family shame, but simply as a human being worthy of basic kindness. Mila sat close beside her, offering a tissue, her eyes full of concern. She signed, "Are you sad?" Elara bowed her head, the truth spilling out through her shaking fingers. "No one wants me." Mila didn't hesitate. The child did something startling, something instantaneous. She wrapped her tiny arms around Elara's waist in a fierce, unexpected embrace. "I want you!" Mila signed against her shoulder. The embrace was the final trigger. Elara broke, sobbing into the tissue Mila had offered. It wasn't a loud, dramatic cry, but a wrenching, silent outpouring of years of isolation, grief, and fear, her tears soaking the small, innocent square of paper held in her hands. An elderly woman, tending her nearby gingerbread stall, watched the silent, emotional scene unfold. She leaned in toward Adrian and spoke softly, her voice raspy like dry leaves. "That girl, she only needs someone to believe in her, dear, not to pity her." Adrian knew silence was vital, yet he needed to communicate. He signed, inviting Elara to take a slow, deliberate walk around the perimeter of the market. He kept his pace intentionally measured, allowing Elara to easily follow the rhythm of his lips, translating her signing into the context of the bustling environment. Slowly, haltingly, Elara told him her story through her hands. She had been thrown out by her family at the age of 16. They called her their shame, an imperfect specimen that they couldn't endure. For the past decade, she had floated, taking low-paying jobs where she could communicate by typing or writing, always keeping her condition hidden. Her ex-boyfriend, Raphael, had initially seemed different, but the resentment had festered, finally erupting into that brutal rejection. Adrian's heart tightened with every sign. The vulnerability in her eyes was agonizingly familiar. He saw flashes of his late wife, Julia, in Elara's quiet dignity. Julia, who had also endured the casual cruelty of relatives who deemed her hearing impairment a personal failure. Mila, walking between them, held Elara's hand tightly. She didn't look at Elara with curiosity, but with the simple, immediate acceptance of family. As they approached the main exit, ready to leave the suffocating cheer for the quiet street, a sharp, aggressive voice cut through the air. "Elara, you thought you could run?" It was Raphael. He was clearly intoxicated, his face blotchy, his jaw clenched with possessive anger. He lunged forward, grabbing Elara's arm with startling force, yanking her toward him. "You're running off with another man? Get back here!" he snarled, dragging her. Elara panicked, shaking her head violently, her hands trying to form signs of protest. "Let go! Please! Let go!" Raphael didn't need to hear her. He saw the terror in her face and the sign language he despised. He tightened his grip, pulling her closer, his voice low and vicious. "I told you not to leave the apartment, didn't I? You useless thing!" Adrian moved instantly. He didn't raise his voice or panic. He simply stepped between them, pulling Elara behind his broad back. "Take your hands off her," Adrian commanded, his voice perfectly level, yet carrying an undeniable steel. Raphael looked Adrian up and down, then burst into a mocking, high-pitched laugh. "What? The big hero? Sticking up for the little deaf girl? You think you're tough because she can't even hear you?" Adrian met the man's gaze, and the kindness that had soothed Elara moments before evaporated. His eyes were cold, dangerous. He signed, his movements powerful and clear, directed straight at Raphael's face. "She doesn't need to hear to know you are trash." The insult, delivered in silence, hit Raphael like a physical blow. Enraged, he lunged, aiming a wild punch at Adrian's head. "Daddy!" "Charari!" Mila screamed, her cry a thin, piercing sound in the sudden tension. Adrian ducked the blow easily. His movements were not the clumsy actions of an average citizen, but the fluid, trained reflexes of someone accustomed to emergency situations. Drawing on his old training as an EMT, where restraining violent patients was sometimes a necessity, he blocked the punch, swiftly twisted Raphael's arm, and locked him to the ground in a quick, clean maneuver that lasted barely 3 seconds. The small crowd that had gathered instantly surged forward, holding Raphael down as Adrian released him, his breath coming hard. Elara was shaking uncontrollably, her hands flying to her face, then to Adrian. Her signs were frantic, desperate. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Adrian immediately signed back, his hands firm against the winter air. "No, you are not sorry. You did nothing wrong." The police arrived swiftly, responding to the commotion. To everyone's relief, one of the officers, a calm, professional woman, stepped forward and began to sign fluidly. She knelt beside Elara, keeping her voice low for the onlookers. "You are safe now, Elara, and you have someone who stands up for you." For a girl who had been told her entire life that she was not enough, not good enough, not complete enough, not worthy enough, that simple sentence, delivered in her own language by an authority figure, was the key. It was the first true warmth she had felt in years, unlocking a lifetime of shame. The female officer placed a hand on Adrian's arm as Raphael was led away. Her expression was solemn. "Sir," she said quietly, "you don't know it, but you just saved that girl's entire life." The police had processed the situation, confirming Elara's story and ensuring Raphael was detained. With the heavy snowfall beginning, Adrian insisted Elara come back to his small apartment, just for the night, for safety. Elara agreed, but fear, not trust, still governed her actions. She moved with a constant, subtle distance, terrified of imposing, of confirming the deep-seated belief that she was, inherently, a burden. When they entered Adrian's cozy, slightly cluttered apartment, the smell of cinnamon and pine immediately soothed her nerves. While Adrian fixed tea in the kitchen, Elara wandered into the living room, her eyes drawn to a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. It was a picture of Adrian, Mila as a baby, and a beautiful woman with kind, smiling eyes. What made Elara stop, her breath catching in her throat, was the small, almost invisible device nestled behind the woman's ear. A hearing aid. Julia, Adrian's late wife. Elara walked slowly back to the kitchen entrance, her hands trembling as she signed the question, the implications dawning on her. "Your wife, she was also hearing impaired?" Adrian paused, the tea kettle whistling softly. He nodded, his eyes warm despite the grief that shadowed them. "Julia," he signed, his hands tenderly forming her name. "She passed 3 years ago. She had a degenerative condition. Mila learned sign language from the time she was a baby. It was her way of communicating with her mother, even when she could hear a little." Elara covered her mouth, a fresh wave of tears hitting her. But these tears were different. They weren't just for Adrian and Mila's loss. They were for the profound, overwhelming realization that washed over her. She finally understood. She understood why Adrian's eyes had held no pity, why his acceptance had been so instantaneous and pure. He wasn't a saint saving a victim. He was a man who understood the deaf experience, who knew the pain of the isolation Elara had just endured. Adrian stepped closer, reaching out to gently cup her elbow. He signed, his expression intensely earnest. "I don't see you as someone to be saved, Elara. I see you as someone who needs to be seen." That single sentence shattered the last remaining wall around her heart. She hadn't just lost her family, she had lost herself, convinced she was unlovable because she couldn't hear. Now faced with a man who had loved, profoundly, a woman with the same struggle, Elara finally allowed herself to grieve not just the past night's events, but her entire life of rejection. She dissolved into loud, heart-wrenching sobs, crying a mix of agonizing pain and delirious, terrifying happiness. The house was quiet, the scent of fresh snow and Christmas lingering in the air. Adrian woke up early to make breakfast, eager to see Elara laugh again. But when he walked into the living room, she wasn't there. His heart sank, instantly recognizing the familiar, deep-seated trauma that often causes people to flee safety. On the coffee table, a small notepad, torn from his kitchen counter, lay waiting. The message was scrawled in a shaky, almost childish hand, her signs translated into hurried words. "Thank you for everything. You and Mila are too good. But I don't belong in your family. I can't stay. I am sorry. E." Adrian didn't hesitate. He pulled on his coat and ran out into the biting cold, the ground already dusted with a new layer of white. He searched the nearest few blocks, knowing she wouldn't have gotten far without money or proper planning. He finally spotted her, a small, huddled figure sitting on a covered bench at the local bus stop. She was shivering violently, hunched over a battered old phone, desperately trying to draft job applications for the minimum wage position she was qualified for. No one else at the stop paid her any mind. She was just another invisible, silent person on the fringes of the city. Adrian strode up to her, his shadow falling across her. Elara looked up, her eyes wide with fear and guilt. Adrian signed, his hands moving fast but every motion sharp and distinct. "Why did you leave us?" Elara signed back just as quickly, the denial pouring out. "I don't want to be a bother. You and the little one deserve happiness without me." Adrian knelt, forcing eye contact. He signed each word slowly, deliberately, his expression stern but filled with a love she had yet to truly accept. "You are not a burden. You are the person that Mila and I have chosen to protect." Elara started to cry again, shaking her head side to side, a silent, painful rejection of his kindness. "I have nothing. I don't deserve this. I'm empty." Adrian reached out, taking her cold hands in his. He signed, the movement strong and absolute, almost a command. "Pack your things." Elara's eyes went wide. She stared blankly, not understanding the abrupt shift. Adrian signed again, placing her hand gently over his own heart. He kept his eyes locked on hers, signing the 5 most significant words she would ever receive. "You're coming home with us." Elara broke. She collapsed against him, sobbing violently, not just for the sadness, but for the shattering realization and that for the first time in 27 years, someone had claimed her. She was no longer wandering. She was home. An elderly woman waiting for the early morning bus watched the intense, silent exchange. She smiled, shaking her head gently. "That young man," she murmured to herself. "He signed that like a declaration of love." Elara returned to Adrian's apartment, not as a guest, but as an adopted member of their tiny, imperfect family. The change was immediate, profound, and utterly necessary. Mila took on the role of Elara's constant companion, gently correcting her signs, helping her practice lip reading through children's books, and insisting on teaching her basic German vocabulary. Elara began to laugh, a soft, husky sound, more in the first week than she had in the previous 5 years. She started eating regularly, the warmth of the food matching the warmth of her newfound environment, and for the first time in a long time, she slept deeply, without the constant background hum of anxiety. Adrian, a natural tinkerer from his EMT days, noticed the old worn hearing aid Elara had packed away, damaged and forgotten. Over a few nights, using tools salvaged from a forgotten project box and a few euros from his accumulated monthly savings, he carefully disassembled and repaired the delicate device. He handed it to her one crisp afternoon. Elara's hands were shaking as she placed it in her ear. She activated it, slowly, timidly. The first sound she registered wasn't the faint rumble of the city or Adrian's gentle breathing. It was the whisper-soft, nearly silent shh, shh of the snow falling outside the window. A sound she hadn't heard or recalled in well over a decade. The sheer, beautiful fragility of the sound was too much. She pressed her face into Adrian's shoulder, weeping, the small, sharp, wonderful sound of the world rushing back in. "Thank you," she signed, the words unnecessary. "Thank you." The repair of the hearing aid was the physical turning point, but the emotional struggle was still present. When Adrian first gently encouraged her to wear it for an entire evening, Elara kept flinching. The sounds were overwhelming. The clink of Mila's spoon against her bowl, the unexpected thud of a book, the low drone of the refrigerator. It was Adrian's endless patience that anchored her. He would often turn off the noise, sit across from her, and sign a memory of Julia struggling with her own device. She said sound was like tasting color again after a lifetime of black and white, he signed. One evening, Mila was practicing her violin, a small, scratchy sound that usually Elara tuned out. This time she heard it. It wasn't perfect music, but it was Mila's effort. Elara pulled the aid out of her ear, tears streaming. I can hear her trying," she signed, her voice thick with emotion. Adrian simply nodded, understanding that the greatest gift wasn't sound clarity, but connection clarity. Later that evening, the 3 of them were in the small kitchen, preparing a meal together, a chaotic, joyful process filled with flour, laughter, and rapid signs. Mila ran around the table, a blur of energy. Elara looked up at Adrian, her eyes shining with true contentment. "I have never had a Christmas like this," she signed. Adrian signed back, smiling at his daughter's antics. "We can make dozens more, as many as you want." In the midst of this domestic peace, An unexpected knock came at the door. It was their neighbors, a small group who had witnessed the scene with Raphael at the market. They stood awkwardly, bearing a small, slightly squashed box of chocolates. One young woman, her face flushed with embarrassment, stepped forward. We came to apologize, she said softly. We thought you were dangerous, Elara, that you were just trouble on the streets. But now we see you laughing, talking to Mila. We realize you just needed to be loved. Elara's eyes were moist again, but her smile was wide and genuine. She took a moment, then signed slowly, allowing Adrian to voice over for the others. It is easy to judge what you cannot understand. Thank you for choosing to see me now. Tabari. The young woman, named Lena, was so moved she later offered to start a small free sign language class in the community center, inspired entirely by Adrian's quiet example. The whole street, previously oblivious, was slowly, profoundly learning the language of heart over ear. Elara bowed her head in gratitude, not with words, not with signs, but with an authentic expression of grace. If you believe that simple kindness can rescue an entire soul, that a single moment of courage can redefine a life, then type in the comments below, I will live kindly. The new year brought opportunity. Adrian, believing in Elara's quiet strength and her powerful communication skills, took her to the local sign language center. It was a place that helped connect the deaf community with resources and training. She registered to apply for a position as a teacher's aide. They accepted her immediately. Her patience, her inherent warmth, and her ability to communicate complex emotion made her the perfect candidate to teach basic ASL to parents of newly diagnosed children. When she received the official job offer, she hugged Mila tightly, then Adrian, weeping tears of pure, unadulterated self-worth. It was the first time she'd been valued for who she was, not judged for what she lacked. Elara's first week at the center was a miracle of purpose. She wasn't just working, she was belonging. The center manager, a deaf elder named Gerda, saw Elara's potential immediately. Your eyes carry the story of what it means to be seen, Gerda signed to her. Elara thrived, finding deep satisfaction in guiding anxious parents through their first signs. She vividly recalled one father whose face was drawn tight with worry, finally signing, I love you to his 5-year-old daughter. The child's subsequent, joyful expression of recognition was a moment of grace that confirmed Elara's true calling. She was a bridge, an anchor, proving that her life experience was not a deficit, but a profound asset. Meanwhile, the relationship with Adrian deepened, built on a shared trauma and silent communication. They often stayed up late, signing their life stories under the dim kitchen light, comfortable in the silence they both understood. They developed their own silent ritual. Every night, after tucking Mila into bed, they would sit on the fire escape steps, sharing a single cup of lukewarm tea, exchanging signs that were part confession, part hopeful planning. Adrian would gently trace the curve of her hand, and Elara would rest her head on his shoulder, both finding sanctuary in the physical, silent presence of the other. One quiet evening, Mila was coloring at the kitchen table. Without looking up from her crayon, she signed clearly to Elara. Mommy taught Daddy how to sign. Did you teach him anything yet, Elara? The title, Mommy, struck Elara with such a tender force that she had to turn away to compose herself. She signed back, her hands shaking slightly. I taught him how to laugh quietly. Mila giggled, accepting the answer easily, confirming Elara's place in their small devoted circle. A short time later, on a Friday night, Adrian brought home a small bag of groceries and signed more seriously than usual. I spoke to the landlord. He needs a co-signer to add another adult to the lease. I want to add you. It wasn't a proposal, but an administrative act of total commitment, an agreement to build a permanent, shared future. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. A lease. Together, she signed. Adrian signed back with a gentle finality that erased every doubt she'd ever held. Yes, a life. Together. For Adrian, this commitment was the final release from his grief over Julia. Loving Elara wasn't replacing his past, but honoring Julia's memory by choosing courage and connection again. That evening, the three of them were sitting in the living room, putting away the last of the Christmas ornaments, lingering in the comfortable glow of the lights. The apartment, now rearranged to accommodate Elara's few possessions, truly felt like theirs. Elara turned to Adrian, her expression serious. She signed the question that held all the fear and hope of her life. Are you certain, me being here, long-term? Adrian signed back instantly, his hands moving with unwavering conviction. I want you here, not out of pity. We need you. Mila, who had been listening intently to the silent conversation, threw herself onto both of them, shouting her childish command, "Family hug!" Elara laughed through her tears, a sound she was finally beginning to truly hear. She had never felt so complete, so anchored. As the three of them sat nestled together under the fairy lights, Elara raised her hands. She formed the simple, profound sentence that her heart had held hostage for 27 long, isolated years. I'm home. Adrian squeezed her hand tight, his eyes reflecting the soft, yellow light of the Christmas tree. And in that moment, Elara understood the deepest truth. Family is not where you are born. Family is the place that opens its arms and signs to you that you belong. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.